What's in your Bible? Acts 12:4, Passover or Easter?
And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people.
Is the word pascha only for the Jewish Passover, or can it also mean the Christian Easter? What do the new versions say?
NIV, after the Passover. ESV, Passover. NASV, Passover. New World Translation, Passover.
A highly contested verse for those who don't pay attention to verse 3.
And because it saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of the unleavened bread.
The Passover was already over. Passover is always on the 14th of Nisan. That's the Feast of Passover. The 7-day Feast of Unleavened Bread starts on Nisan 15 and lasts for 7 days with the Sabbath at the beginning and on the end. It's not the Saturday Sabbath, they are special Sabbaths. The Feast of Unleavened Bread is where they go through and they clean their entire house, getting rid of any leaven or bread, every little crumb that they can find. Kind of a spring cleaning of the house, which is a picture of removing sin from a house, or our removing sin from our body, the temple, but that's another video. William Tindale created the word Passover for the Hebrew and Greek pasach or paska, depending upon Old or New Testament. Paska doesn't mean just the Jewish Passover. It can also mean the Christian Easter. In essence, the word pascha is kind of like holiday, but the definition of that holiday is depending upon if it's before the resurrection, which would be Passover, or after the resurrection, which would be Easter. Since Tyndale created the word Passover, it seems really odd that in this one place in the entire Bible that he would just translate it Easter, if it only meant the Jewish Passover. The word pascha in Acts 12:4 is the first time it is mentioned after the resurrection. The followers of Christ celebrated the resurrection of Christ in the following years, and it became known as Easter. From the German and Saxon, which represents east and dawn. We have sunrise services because Jesus was resurrected at the dawn, or at the beginning of the day. Jesus was resurrected on the first day of the week. If you look up pascha in modern Greek dictionaries, it's got two different definitions. One's Easter, the other one's Passover. If pascha only meant the Jewish Passover, there would be no reason to define that it was the Jewish Passover. What other Passover would there be?
John 2:13. And the Jews' Passover was at hand. John 11:55. And the Jews' Passover was nigh at hand.
Is there another Passover? Unless, of course, pascha means something other than just the Jewish Passover. Tyndale used other forms of the word Easter, like Easter lamb, in his translation, so him and the other translators knew that it wasn't a pagan festival for Herod. All Reformation Bibles have Easter. In the first edition 1557 Geneva Bible, it had Easter, but then in the 1560, it was changed to Passover. The Bishop's Bible corrected it back to Easter, and the King James followed suit, matching with all of the other Reformation Bibles, so Geneva was the one that was set apart from that. Polycarp, who is one of John's disciples, celebrated Easter. There were other church fathers that also celebrated Easter. So it was a Christian celebration before Constantine got their fingers into it. The pagan practices of rabbits and eggs and all that stuff came years later. Just another diversion to train up children away from the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Oh, feed them candy. Let them go searching for hidden stuff. Yeah, anything except teaching them about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Satan always has a counterfeit to distract from what God really wants us to know. To prove this point, ask any child what Easter or Christmas is, and if they tell you it's the time when they get to hunt for Easter eggs or see Santa Claus, then you know that there's a serious problem. Now, some Bibles didn't translate the word pascha, they just transliterated it, meaning they put that in the verse. They knew there was something different, but they didn't know how to handle it. I also find it interesting that the new translations will use Tyndale's word that he created, Passover, but then they'll ignore what Tyndale translated in Acts 12:4 as being Easter. So instead of finding out why Tyndale translated it as Easter, they just said, well, he just made a mistake. And Coverdale made a mistake, and Matthews made a mistake, and the Great Bible made a mistake, and the first edition Geneva made a mistake, and Bishops made a mistake, and King James made a mistake. All of them? Really? The fact that the Reformation translators translated it as Easter means that they knew there was something different and that it didn't mean the Jewish Passover. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to translate Acts 12:4 as Easter if all the other ones are translated as Passover. That should throw a red flag. The Reformation translators were not ignorant or sloppy. They had a purpose in their translations. With difficult passages like this, it seems like the more we study, the more we see that God had his hand in preserving his word. There are two mindsets you can have when considering difficult passages. You can assume it's just a sloppy error and move on, or you can study to find out the truth. Study, show thyself approved unto God.